Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, welcome to the April 12th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. My name is Jamie Finch, and I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, we will have some members attending in person and others that will be attending by computer or phone. For those attending remotely, please mute when you're not speaking. If you need to speak, please indicate in the chat, and we'll do our best to see that you've done so. And then when you're done, please make sure that you do mute again. For those in person, as we always do, please tip your name card up if you would like to speak. We will summarize agreement around topics and recommendations, and then we'll reach out to see if there's any amendments or changes to how I've summarized. So please let me know if I've missed anything. Stacy, could you take us through attendance?
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson has an excused absence. Jamie Finch.
Here.
Rishi Hazra.
Here.
Laura Lebeco. Ashwin Manoharan.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb. There. And Janet Wall.
Here.
Thank you, Stacy. Do we have any comments on the minutes from March 8th or March 16th? Hearing none, they are approved as presented. Stacy, do we have anyone joining from the public or that's indicated a desire to speak?
We do have a member of the public, Shrivishnu. Apologies if I'm not saying that correctly. You can send a chat if you're interested in providing public comments. Or if you want to raise your hand and then Jamie can go through the public comment rules. Not seeing any interest, go ahead and do send me a chat. They said that they don't have anything right at this time. So, great.
All right, well, I think with that, we can move into our agenda items. The first one being waste reduction and the RE+ pledge.
All right, well, thank you. Hopefully, our screen will work tonight. I'm not transitioning, 1 moment.
It was showing up online, I think it's this.
It's just this room. Yeah. All right. Great, well, thank you. So I'm gonna present a little bit of a refresher on the RE+ program, then hand it over to Logan, is gonna talk about recology and waste reduction efforts, and then we'll come back and consider the RE+ pledge. Let's see, so really this first part is just a refresher on some information that the King County's RE+ program presented to us back in the fall. And tonight we are providing this background information so that the board feels that they can make an informed decision regarding whether or not to recommend the King County RE+ pledge for the mayor's signature. But almost 70% of what currently goes into King County's landfill could have been recycled, composted, or reused. Without intervention, waste and its associated greenhouse gas emissions will increase as the county's population increases, and our only active landfill, Cedar Hills, will be full by 2040. King County has defined that a systematic shift is needed to transition from a throwaway economy to one that prevents waste and makes better use of valuable materials. King County Solid Waste Division has launched this new program called RE+ to address these pressing issues. So within the memo, we provide a little bit of information around these different actions. I'll just go through them very quickly. These are the main focus areas for the RE+ program. There's the extended producer responsibility for packaging and paper products. This is to secure commitments from businesses to take responsibility for product waste through fair and appropriate policies. The innovation platform and RE+ circular economy grants. This is to stimulate a waste-free economy through inclusive and equitable grants, technical support, and guidance. They also have launched the RePlus City Grants. These are a competitive grant program for King County cities to implement innovative zero waste and recycling programs. Statewide organics policy legislation. This is where they're helping to advance state and county legislation to send food and yard waste to be recycled and kept out of the landfill. Single-family organics collection is to optimize collection services for food and yard waste from all single-family households in King County. Non-residential food waste recycling is to provide technical support to local businesses to help them keep food waste out of the landfill and manage it as a resource. Mixed waste processing is the last screen for capturing recyclables out of the waste stream. And community panel, this is where they're bringing together diverse communities and voices to chart a path towards a more equitable waste-free King County. And then finally is the city and county collaboration to increase that collaboration between the county and the cities within to reach the zero waste goals for the region. So as mentioned, King County has requested that jurisdictions sign on to the RePlus pledge. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We do believe that there's strong alignment with the pledge and the climate action plan, the work that we're already doing through existing grants and Recology's collection contract. We'll just walk through each of those briefly. So as you're aware, the ICAP set really bold targets for climate action, and this included an increase in waste diversion from landfills. We have actions identified in the ICAP around reducing certain waste streams, outreach and education around waste reduction, and policy implementation, such as enhancing and strengthening our construction and demolition debris, as well as sustainable purchasing. Issaquah's 2023-2024 King County Waste Reduction and Recycling Grant helps to run a number of programs around the city. We do recycling collection events for residents to drop off hazardous materials or items such as appliances, tires, styrofoam, and used oil. We have an event coming up this Saturday. If you need information, let me know. And then we also provide supplies and educational materials to increase diversion and decrease contamination for recyclables and compostables. We're looking at exploring opportunities for a tool lending library or a gear lending library, as well as repair events. And so far this year, we have been working with Lake Sammamish State Park to relaunch their recycling program, also working with an elementary school to restart their composting and recycling program that stopped during the pandemic. And then as mentioned, we're also doing the recycling events, and those are in partnership with Sammamish. Our consultant team is also supporting businesses to provide waste reduction education or help them initiate recycling or composting. And then our public works team is helping to prevent outreach, or is helping provide outreach to businesses on pollution prevention and waste reduction. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Logan to talk about a number of initiatives that Recology has.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I apologize not in person, but I'm back visiting family in Sonoma right now. So excited to be with you virtually. It's a great to have this option. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide. Recology has signed a 12-year agreement with the city of Issaquah. We're really excited about it and excited to get started. This starts July 1st of 2023. So it's a new 12-year agreement. In the agreement, we have a number of increased services for the city of Issaquah that will help drive diversion and help the city achieve its zero waste goals and its climate emission goals. So the number one thing here is our full-time waste zero specialist who's dedicated to the city of Issaquah. So this individual is a full-time employee who will work with the city's multifamily and commercial businesses to help them understand how their waste stream is working currently and help them improve it. So what we do is we look at, well, I can get into this a little bit later, but we look at kind of different businesses and which ones have the most garbage and the least recycling and compost. We reach out to them. We provide the tools and information that they need to move in the right direction. and then we help them right size their containers. So that's kind of that targeted data-driven approach. We're looking at all of the folks that we have, and which ones are food waste producing businesses like a restaurant or an acute care center or a hospital, a school, preschool, things like that. Then we'll go into those businesses, help educate them on how to do it, provide indoor bins to help them with it, provide signage, provide training, and help them reduce that material. And this will also help them save money. In the new contract with Recology, all customers get unlimited recycling. So as much as they can possibly recycle, they're allowed that volume at no additional charge. They also get up to 2 compost carts for free. So just as part of their garbage service. So this will help them divert more material at no cost. And then as they reduce their bill, they can actually save monthly on their monthly garbage bill by reducing the volume of garbage that they have. So kind of as I've already covered, waste zero specialists, we're going to do a targeted approach to reducing waste. And then we'll do in-person training for tenants and businesses. Beyond that, to reduce contamination, we're going to be doing an annual inspection of every single multifamily and commercial recycling bin to check for contamination. When we find it, we will go ahead and follow up with that business. We'll provide them a tag and a mailed letter of what we found that was contaminating, and then provide education. For multifamily tenants, that's going to look like us going around to every single apartment door and hanging recycle right bags and a little notice that they can put up of what you need to recycle and what should not be going in the recycling bin. So here are the right things to recycle, here's how to do it, and then here are the materials that should not going. On top of that, we have the 2 electric vehicles that we're going to be bringing. So we have 2, they're really kind of among the first in nation automated side load vehicles that'll be electric. They'll be here for the city in 2025. Something we're really excited about. And it is kind of the bleeding edge of technology. So we'll see. It should be interesting to see how that works. And then beyond that, the Recology store will remain in action here. We do waste zero education, sell a lot of tools that you need to kind of reduce the waste that you produce, and also allow people to recycle hard to recycle items like styrofoam, batteries, fluorescent light bulbs, so those kinds of materials. We can go on to the next slide. It's probably stuff that I've already said. So again, the diversion program, that's really where we're trying to move people from a situation where they're throwing everything away to helping them identify what material they could be composting, what material they could be recycling, and helping them reduce the size of that garbage bin. This is something I personally did working in at Recology Sonoma Marin in Sonoma County, working with restaurants. I would help them cut their garbage volume in half. With a restaurant, you can imagine it's a lot of food waste material, lots of pancakes that nobody finishes, lots of kind of food, and then also the food waste from just prepping the outside of an onion, all that kind of stuff. And beyond that, we really want to educate residents that your compost is not just for yard waste anymore. This is something you put meat, cheese, bones, a whole cacophony of material can be started to move into that compost bin. And we're about to send a mailer to all residents, multifamily property managers, and commercial business owners, encouraging them to engage with this program and reduce their waste and save money through that process. Go on to the next slide. Multifamily diversion education. So this is an example of the door hanger that we provide. It's in English and Spanish, and we're working to add a QR code that will translate it into probably about 5 other languages that will go on every single door. And that comes with a reusable tote bag that also has recycling information on it. And that's a bag that they can use to bring their recyclables out to the recycling bin. So this is actually who will be Issaquah's Waste Zero Specialist is Lauren Herber. She's an awesome person. She's already probably door hung, I don't know, 5 or 6 multifamilies in city of Issaquah. I talked to Joe Russell, and he said he's had his apartment hit up twice with our recycling information. So we're really happy about the progress she's been making there. And so we always recheck once we start a building with more recycling. That becomes part of our contamination monitoring program, and we try to recheck, reframe, and help out. So we're offering presentations to tenants and this kind of door-to-door education at the multifamily level. Going to the next one. Again, with commercial, this is kind of the package that we're offering commercial businesses. So it's a indoor tote, a package of recycling or compostable bags, and then compostable education. So we'll go in, provide this material, and help them get started with that composting process. And so we really hope that this is going to help people divert material. Composting is kind of a new thing up in Washington, and so people really need a lot of education. There's a new state law, SB 1799, that passed last year. And in 2026 or 2027, it's going to require anybody who has any business that has 4 yards of solid waste, which is garbage and recycling, to also procure compost volume. So this is going to be a big thing that's going to be coming out, and we're going to, with this waste zero specialist in our programs, I think we're really going to be able to help with it. Going to the next one. The Recology store, again, the contract, we were the only hauler that offers the Recology store in the region, or really probably anywhere. It's quite a unique offering. And not only are a lot of these items collected curbside, where you can schedule a pickup of EV waste, battery waste, fluorescent light bulbs, styrofoam in the city of Issaquah, but you can also take them right into the Recology store to drop them off for free. So we're glad to see that stay, and it's a well-beloved feature that we have as part of our contract. Go to the next. Yeah, and so this is the pre-contract outreach, and so we've got a couple of mailers that we're sending out to residents, commercial and multifamily tenants, as I mentioned. With residents, we're really pushing the compost message, encouraging people to start composting food waste, which is something that I think people are hesitant to do right now. And then educating them that, it is part of their contract, part of their garbage rate, so it's already included in their rate. And if you reduce the size of that garbage bin, you can save money. On the multifamily commercial side, we're really encouraging folks to reach out to us, get in touch with our waste zero specialist, have somebody come out and work with them, get a free audit, and get that education for their tenants or their employees on how to properly recycle and compost so that they can divert that material over into the right stream. So we'll be presenting this mailer to council. I've just got the final draft coming tomorrow. So that'll be going to our the city's contracted the city's contracted employee who oversees our contract, and probably reviewed by other city employees. And really the focus there is you can reduce your bill by composting and recycling. It's the right thing to do, and there's a lot of room to grow for the city of Issaquah on the diversion piece. Next slide. I don't know if there's anything more there. Great.
Do you want to pause here, take questions for Logan before we move into the Plus Pledge?
Yeah, that'd be great. I had those couple of questions that I sent. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Logan, the questions from Jamie, I don't know if you're able to address those.
Yeah, let me pull those up again. Questions. So right now, there's nobody that, other than Seattle, that penalizes folks. So the first question was, are there any jurisdictions around us other than Seattle that require composting and penalize those that include food waste in their garbage? There's none that I'm aware of right now. There's a couple cities that are considering composting requirements. I know the city of Burien has passed one, I believe. The city of SeaTac is looking at it. The city of Shoreline is looking at passing compost requirements, and the state has passed it as well. But all of these don't have significant fines or teeth with regard to composting or that material ending up in garbage. So right now, no, there is no requirement from any other cities, especially not with any penalties for including food waste in their garbage. And it, frankly, with garbage, it's very difficult to even do a penalty on that. Typically, it's going to be in opaque bags, and we're unlikely to start sending people out to open up those bags and check to see if there's food waste. But we know if you're like a restaurant or a place that has significant amounts of food moving through it, and you have no compost available to you, that's kind of a red flag for us that says probably that garbage has a significant amount of food waste in it. Do Seattle's requirements apply to businesses? Absolutely. We run 50% of Seattle, and so that's one of the big things we're doing right now is looking at businesses that haven't already gotten compost and kind of slipped under the radar, and really doing that outreach. During COVID, we couldn't do as much outreach, and so now we're kind of ramping that back up. So yeah, absolutely, businesses and specifically restaurants is the main focus for them. Are landlords required to provide city waste and recycling services? They are required, I believe, to provide garbage, but not recycling. So recycling is not required for tenants to have, but certainly an option. When I worked in California as kind of a waste service specialist and doing that kind of outreach, one of the things we would do is if we had a non-respondent property manager or business owner, we would eventually just drop the bin and do the education. I'd provide the door hangers to everybody, and the bin would arrive, whether the property manager wanted it or not. But that's because we had a state law that required it, and then we were also backed with fines that we could levy on a business or a multifamily if they contaminated the bin. That's one of the things we're really worried about. Issaquah doesn't have that charge on contamination, but we do remove the bin after a number of contaminations have occurred, and we've talked to the city and we cannot get them to stop throwing the wrong material into the recycling bin.
Thank you, Logan. Janet?
Yes, a number of years, it was, I think, before the pandemic, I had contacted the, David Fujimoto about having a tour of the Cedar Hills recycling facility. And that was going to happen, and then he left, and yeah, but that might be something we might consider.
Yeah, that's a great point.
if people are
Actually,
interested.
Karen Dawson from Cedar Grove just reached out to see if there would be interest in a tour from city staff. I think June 8th was the Maple Valley tour, so we could send that along, and if we need to call it a special meeting, if there's enough interest, we could do that. So
That'd be something
let me- I'll
interesting.
connect with-
Sometimes you wonder about exactly, am I processing this enough to go in the recycling rather than, which fine details on
Well,
various.
if I may, City of Issaquah's recycling comes to the Recology MRF, or Materials Recovery Facility, which is located in Georgetown, and we'd be more than happy to host this group out there. So yeah, JC, I'm sure reach out to me and we'll figure out a date.
great. So we could do both the
That'd be
recycling facility and the composting.
I'm there.
Great.
It's pretty fun.
Janet, anything else?
No, that's it.
Great, we'll go to Tom and then Laura. I know you have a couple questions. We'll go to you after Tom.
Okay, Tom Anderson here. I'm just wondering about timing of things. So we're just at the front end here of a 12-year contract. 12 years is a long time. We're going to learn how to do things better over that interval. How much flexibility is there in the contract to make improvements? Continuous process improvement is what we need here, and we're going to learn along the way. How will that be factored into that improvement of the process as we move forward through that 12-year interval?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think we at Recology always seek to improve. We're signing a contract right now to add artificial intelligence enabled robotics on a residual stream, because we noticed that there was a certain amount of aluminum and plastics that were recyclable that were getting kind of tossed out at the paper level. So we're already kind of moving into that stage. If there's something that isn't covered in the contract, there is a piece of the contract that allows for pilot programs, which are a partnership between the city and Recology to try new things out. And we've been amenable to contract amendments as well. So we really seek as a company to partner closely with our cities. And if there's ideas and things like that that we think are valuable, we're always going to work with you. I mean, I think over the course of the contract, our waste service specialist is going to pay a lot of dividends. Issaquah's recycling or overall diversion rate is less than 50% right now. So there's a significant amount of growth that's possible. I think there's going to be a lot of success as we kind of really focus in on that diversion piece. But we're always willing to kind of continue to expand. We're required in the contract to sit down with the city, and I believe 2025, and discuss the possibility of increasing the electrification of vehicles. But we are buying all new trucks for the city of Issaquah, including those 2 EVs. So yeah, it's something that we're always willing to chat about and see where the city wants to go. But, depending on the size of it, it may take, contract amendments or rate increases and things like that. So.
Well, is there any, like an annual review built into the process for refinement or anything like that?
We meet with the city on a monthly basis to discuss just kind of how things are going. We report all the kind of recycling rates and things like that. We submit an annual report to the city as well. And there is language in the contract that the city could trigger a review process at any time. But the city, we maintain very close ties with city staff. And if there was a desire from council or the environmental board to pursue changes to the contract, it's something we would engage in good faith.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Laura, go ahead.
Hey, I had two questions. In terms of the pledge, it sounds great. So I feel like the discussion's a little bit off topic, but I'm not sure. The one question was if we know anything about, you said less than 50% is recycled or composted, which seems really sad as a result. But do we know like anything more about why people are not recycling, and if that's coming, like if there's higher or lower, like do you know a breakdown of like businesses versus single family versus multifamily?
Yeah, the residences have the highest diversion rate. So single family homes have the highest diversion rate. I believe the lowest is in the commercial sector. These are the commercial.
Do you know approximately what that is, just for some context for us?
I can look it up. It'll just take
We
a
won't hold
second.
you to it. Just an estimate is helpful.
Yeah, just an estimate. Okay, so I think so like the aggregate is below 50. I think residential is like around 48 to 52, and then I think businesses are somewhere in the like 42%, and multifamilies around there. So there's a lot of growth. Most multifamilies do not have composting at all. Most businesses do not have composting at all. And a number of multifamily businesses do not have recycling services at this time. But I think, part of that has been Issaquah has had historically low garbage rates for a long period of time, like very, very low. And there is going to be a change to that with the new contract. And I think that'll encourage some people to divert material to a certain degree.
Thank you. Yeah, so it feels like there's so much room for improvement, and such a, we have one person that is really able to go and champion these things. I'd be curious to see more of, if you could experiment with where's the big, like what's the lowest hanging fruit or the most implementable. Like I assume that composting is much higher with residential than it would be with anyone else, in part because business requires so much labor for it that they're not set up for. But seeing what ways, like, what is the lowest hanging fruit and where can we target it? Because it just, it seems a little sort of like buckshot, like there's so many things to do, so where do we start? But I'll leave it to you. Go ahead.
No, for sure. So what we do is we look at garbage volume. So like, what are the largest volume producers of garbage? And then we compare that to how much recycling do they have. And so I think we'd start with making sure everybody has recycling. So if you're a multifamily property that doesn't have recycling, we're coming for you. So we're going to make sure that you get that recycling bin in. We do the education and that kind of stuff. The other lowest hanging fruit is really food service businesses that don't have composting. That's going to be a lot of weight, and composting is the heaviest one. Diversion is weight based, just kind of how we measure it. And so looking at food service businesses that don't have compost, that's going to be kind of the next target. Our team has a number of, their goal is a certain number of compost starts per month. And so we're looking to see that change over time. And, with the state mandate coming in and all those kinds of things, I think there's going to be a lot of education for it. And then the higher garbage rates into the new contract will start putting some financial pressure for people to move material in the other direction. And that the literature we're sending them really encourages that move as well. So we expect to see it change, but you're right. It's a difficult process. And, through a competitive bid, just some knowledge on how the kind of garbage rate works or new garbage contracts work. Recology bid against other haulers, and the split is 60% price based and 40% services based. And so that kind of educator and things like that are valued at 60%, and then prices, or 40%, and then prices valued at 60%. So we kind of organize our bid in that way. And so, I do think that having the Waste Zero educator there is going to be a huge benefit to the city. No other suburban cities that we have a contract with, except for the new contract with the city of Tukwila, which was after Issaquah's, have a dedicated Waste Zero specialist. So it's going to be a big help. And they're going to be, and Lauren personally is a go-getter. I mean, she's a hard charger. So I think we're going to see some good turnaround over there, and we'll be able to report that on an annual basis.
Just to interrupt you, only in the interest of time, because I believe you. I'm not worried about it happening. I'm just worried about our community turning it around. The other question I had was about signage and related to education. I know that you were updating your store, so I haven't been in there recently, but it looks like some of your other stores have more signage, but it would be great to see more window signage implying that people can come in, because it kind of looks like a store and not like a place I can go and drop off community goods to divert. So, but I wasn't sure if you updated that, but also I'll let you speak to that. But in addition, it'd be great to see some of that signage maybe carried into the food services areas, so that, and the information so that they know, so we're not just like going in one way, but asking if you can drop off, some of your posters or whatever, so that the people who you're encouraging to recycle and compost actually are, promoting your message as well. That's fine.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all I
absolutely.
wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you.
Logan, I had a question. So you mentioned the state bill that just passed. Was it 2026, and was that both composting and recycling that would be required in businesses, or do you remember me on the details of that?
Yeah, so don't fully quote me on this because I don't have the exact years memorized, but it's Senate Bill 1799, so 1799, and that passed last year, or 2021, so 2 years ago now. Is that 2 years ago now? Sort of. Anyway, so what it requires is only composting, and so it requires only composting and only in commercial facilities, and it's a stair step. So it starts at, I think it's this year, 8 yards, which is a significant amount. It's bigger than it's our biggest dumpster of food waste per year. You're required to, per week, 8 yards of food waste per week. You're required to have composting services. Now that affects almost nobody in the city of Issaquah. That's like maybe a hospital, but mostly like a food producing factory that doesn't have its own composting services. Then it steps down to 6 yards per week of compostable material. Then it goes to 4 yards per week, and then it goes 4 yards of solid waste per week has to arrange for composting services. That's when it's really going to hit all the businesses kind of all at once. And it's modeled in a way off of California State Law AB 1826. But yeah, so 1799 does not require recycling, only requires composting, and it's about 2026, 2027 that it's going to start hitting your average restaurant.
Okay, that's helpful. So it sounds like to a certain extent the commercial side will be taken care of by that bill, at least for composting. But currently there's nothing that affects residential, either multifamily or single family homes in that way. So like basically Seattle's all on its own with the requirement, and as things stand, there's not really requirements other than what the state would agree. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it will take care of them, but keep in mind it has no teeth. There's no fines in place for people who don't do it. The state is not going to regulate it very strongly. I think it's unlikely. So it'll be up to us, and Recology will be doing a forceful job of getting this done. So I'm glad we have this kind of specialist here for the city of Issaquah, and the other cities that we service we have a team of outreach folks. There's one that's specific for Issaquah, but that'll implement that law. But it isn't, California passed AB 1826 and didn't see the diversion goals that they wanted. And then they passed 1383, which adds teeth, fines for not only businesses, but also cities if they don't start composting. So
Okay.
we'll see if that comes up.
Would you say if Issaquah really wanted to increase diversion rates beyond what is going to be mandated by the state, would those be the actions that as a city we should be taking? Are those the most effective or most likely to have significant impact actions that could be taken at the city level? Is there anything else that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of up to the city to determine where they want to go. Speaking just as me personally, I think mandates can help for sure. If it's required, then people have to do it. But it's something that, we'd always want to be talking about because there's change in law parts of our contract as well. But I think looking at multifamily mandates and things like that makes sense. And especially our recycling too.
Thank you, Logan.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Logan? All right.
All right.
Thank you, Logan. I think, Stacey, are you going to take us through the final steps of this
Yep.
presentation?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Logan. Lots to follow up with you on. So we want to provide all of that information as context for the request pledge consideration. The mayor's looking to the board on a recommendation on whether or not to sign the pledge. Just as a quick overview again, at the staff level, we do not feel that the pledge requires anything that we can't support. We feel like it really aligns well with our climate action plan, the current waste reduction efforts we have, as well as our work with Recology. We don't anticipate any additional staffing costs or impact to city operations. One advantage of the pledge is it will make the city, if they choose to pursue, would become eligible for the new King County RePlus city grants. Then last thing I'll just mention is that there are, at least this was a couple weeks ago, there were 8 communities so far that had signed on. A couple examples, Woodville, Kirkland, Newcastle, Shoreline. So we'll be in good company signing on. I can pull up the pledge if folks want to look at it on the screen, or we can just move to any discussion. So again, looking for a formal recommendation from the board on whether or not the city should sign the pledge.
Maybe, do we want to start with questions first on the pledge, and then we can move from there into a more formal part of the process? So maybe now, if there's any questions, we've kind of asked Logan all the questions on the ecology side. Now, if there's any questions for Stacey / the city on the pledge, this would probably be the right time to ask those questions. Go ahead.
Is there anything that staff sees that could improve?
Within the pledge?
Yeah.
That is a great question. We didn't really look at it from that standpoint, more just if we had concerns, since it is something King County put together and is going to hand it to the city. So we haven't reviewed it for improvements. So it's a great question. If there are suggestions or things that you all say, I could take that back to King County to consider for future updates. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, so I'm wondering about this issue that I brought up before about continuous improvement to the process and all that. And so we have a contract that's somewhat rigid that we're writing now and entering into that. And I don't know, I don't really see anything in the pledge here about continuous improvement in that. It's so are we just shooting for this 70%? No, that's a different number. I guess there aren't objective numbers about what we're trying to achieve. It's just more of a spirit of it. Is that right?
I think that is correct. Within the solid waste management plan, which I'm trying to see if they reference here, they do. There are some more specific goals, I believe, identified in that align with goals that are in our climate action plan. So it's referencing those larger overarching plans.
Okay, well, I guess I have the fear that we're gonna get to the point where, okay, yes, we need to do better in the following area, and then to do that, we're gonna have to have a little pilot program to improve recyclability in a particular area, and this is gonna require renegotiation of something or other with Recology, and will that be a stumbling block? Those are kind of my concerns, but I will say that I think this idea of regional alignment is absolutely something we should strive to. So if there isn't some big obstacle, then yes, we should definitely sign on to this if we can, just in terms of regional harmony and all working towards the same goals here. That should definitely be our goal, and I hope we can make it work. That's all.
Go ahead, Janet.
I just was going to make some comments that I really appreciate the Recology store. It's a place I try to avoid buying things that have like styrofoam trays, but that's a place that I can take the styrofoam money that I have. And also they provide a lot of advice on what to do with various items. I do take also any, batteries, household batteries that are defunct, and I tape those and then bring those in, and they take those. It's also the reduction in the amount of garbage that I have. I was able to, years ago, to change my garbage collection to once a month. So that reduces the costs for me. And let's see what else. Oh, yes, I've been working on restoring our local park. And one of the problems that I've had or having is that the apartments that are adjacent to this park put up a new fence. And in doing so, they purposely, you just can see the evidence, laid down the fence that we had there, our fence, just cut it down and laid it on the ground, and then blackberries grew up through it. And so I can't dig out the blackberries until I get rid of the fence. And I went to the Recology store and asked them whether there was some place that would be able to recycle this. It's a metal wire fence. And they gave me 2 business cards of places that I could check and ask them, like, how big a section of the fence do they prefer, and that sort of thing.
Kepler's takes all that stuff.
I was trying to think whether that was one. One was the One Green Planet.
Oh.
And then there was another one that basically took all metals.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
It's a good
So I
resource.
will, I've decided I'm gonna cut the blackberries down to about 1 foot, because it's hard to get the fence out until you deal with at least partially deal with the blackberries. And then once I can get sections of the fence pulled out, after the blackberries are cut down, so I can at least know where they are, then I can dig out the blackberries.
Sounds like a good project.
Thank you, Janet. Any other questions? We will have the opportunity to make some comments before we get into the process as well. So if there's any other questions, and then we'll move into any comments that anyone wants to make on this prior to going through the formal process. I will make a comment. So in my mind, the Replus pledge is a no-brainer, but I don't think it does enough. I would really like the city to be looking at what opportunities there are beyond the Replus pledge, given that we're already doing a lot of the things in the city, and given what Logan shared, I think that there's something that we should be investigating around requirements for both residential, multifamily, and commercial business, like for businesses around the requirements around recycling and composting. So yeah, I think just to summarize, totally in favor of the RE+ pledge myself. I think the city needs to be looking beyond that into what we can do to be a leader. Any
I agree.
other?
I just want to second what you just said. I think it's like a nice gesture, but and it's great that we have a partner who's so active, but I think we're all sort of like, okay, let's do it. So I agree.
All right, any other comments? Go ahead.
So are we going to, could that be a recommendation?
Yeah, so I think the next step, once we're done with comments, we'll be looking for a motion on whether we want to recommend as presented, do not recommend, or recommend with changes. So like an example would be, yeah, we wanted to recommend with changes. We could have something along the lines of we would like to be more aggressive and find ways to go beyond what the RE+ pledge.
Yeah. Or go with like what Tom was saying, is room for improvement, continuous room for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be the next step. So if there's any, we can have comments on this generally, and then next step would be me asking for motions. And it doesn't appear like we have any other comments. So now I will be looking for a motion on item at hand, which is whether we should be recommending to the mayor that we sign the RE+. She signs the RE+ pledge.
So I'll make a motion to recommend with changes to reflect both Tom and Jamie's comments in there. I'll throw it out there, a biannual process improvement review to see if there's ways that it could be improved every other year. And then just a commitment by the city to be looking into the future and beyond just the RE+ pledge. I don't know exactly how you want to word that.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, ma'am. So now we have discussion of the motion at hand. Any questions or comments on the motion that Don presented? Don, if you'd like to speak in addition to that at the beginning, free to do that, or else we can just open it up. Any questions or comments? All right, well then I think we are probably ready to vote on the motion. Stacy, would you take us through a roll call vote?
Will do, and Janet and Tom are sitting in as regular members tonight. Tom? Aye or nay?
A, I,
Aye.
Aye, was probably better.
You can see how often we vote. Jamie?
Aye.
Rishi?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Ashwin?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
And Janet?
Aye.
Right, the motion passes with unanimous consent. Thank you, everyone. I think that, unless there's anything else you need from us, Stacy, on that topic, we can move to the comprehensive plan update. Let's see, taking us through.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. I am going to discuss the creation of a new environmental element for the comprehensive plan, and I'll explain the context of why, but also what kind of information we're looking for from the board tonight in support of the creation of this new element, because it's newish as we're creating a new label, creating a new section, but the content is using a lot of the same information that you all helped put into the comprehensive plan update when the ICAP was put together. So the three questions I'll be asking you tonight is, what should be included in the vision? Because this is a new element, we need to create a new vision statement to support it. What's the content of the environmental element, as well as what are potential gaps that staff can be looking into as we're starting this process for the comprehensive plan update? So a little background information about the comprehensive plan. Back in 1990, the state legislature adopted something called the Growth Management Act. And what they intended with this act was to address population growth and to force cities and counties to create these long-term plans to address sprawl and quality of life for communities. Because at the time, some cities, some counties had long-term plans, but not everybody, and they were all doing it about it in a different way. So this GMA provides a framework essentially for all of our comprehensive plans to address the same topics in a certain level of ways that we are effectively and efficiently looking at how we're spending public funds and investments into planning for long-term 20 years out. So part of the framework is requiring regional coordination for cities and counties, as well as adopting county and regional policies related to how the growth is occurring throughout the region. So for the comprehensive plan, there's two different types of updates to consider. The first is an annual, which is an optional update that the city actually takes advantage of quite frequently. And there's the periodic update that occurs every year, and that's actually the required update for all cities and counties. This will be changing to 10 years after this process, but it's been every 8 years, and so our last periodic update was 2015. So all the elements that you see on the screen is everything that's currently in our comprehensive plan right now. And the two elements that are highlighted are the two that are actually not required by the state to have in the comprehensive plan. So the city of Issaquah has actually chosen to add these elements into the comprehensive plan as we're proposing to do with the environmental element. So for this update, the scope is looking at three primary goals. First is compliance, coordination, and then design and access. For compliance, it really is what it states. We're looking at state regulations as it relates to anything that's recently been adopted to anything that's currently in our legislative session that's about to be adopted, and seeing what we need to now incorporate into our comprehensive plans so that we are compliant with the state as well as any regional or King County changes in policies on what we should be accommodating as we grow out as a city. We're also looking at coordination between elements. So one thing I'll be talking about a little bit is we've adopted a lot of different strategic action plans in the last several years, the ICAP being one of them. And one of the things that we want to make sure that is working across the board of the comprehensive plan is that all of our policies and goals are working together and being coordinated in an accurate way. And if they're not, we need to be able to address that during this periodic update. So as I stated, there's been a lot of what's called functional plans that have been updated or created recently. The ICAP, the Mobility Master Plan, the Human Services Strategic Plan was recently adopted. And so we are trying to work on incorporating a lot of that work that, if it hasn't already been incorporated into the comprehensive plan, and doing that coordination across the board. A couple other system plans with our public works departments here working on utility updates. And so we're working with these plans that have not yet been adopted and making sure they're also coordinated into the comprehensive plan as well. And then separately, economic development and parks are going to be updating their strategic plans, which will also include the update for their elements, the parks and the economic development or economic vitality elements of the comprehensive plan. And the last major goal for this update is design and access. So one of the biggest issues that staff have already pointed out with the comprehensive plan is it's fairly inaccessible. How many of you have actually tried to access the comprehensive plan? So one of the biggest issues that we have found is most people need a lot of direction on how to access the comprehensive plan. It's not so intuitive to go to the city website and just find it. You have to click through a lot of different sub-pages and web pages to find where it is, and then find the PDFs that each of the elements are broken out to. They're not as accessible as we'd like them to be. They're not translated, they're not known by staff and most of the community members on what's in the comprehensive plan. So we want this to be created to be a much more user-friendly and useful tool for the city. And so that's part of this last part, or it's part of this last goal for this periodic update, is to make it much more easier to use. Because ultimately what we want to do is create this planning framework that works seamlessly from the vision and goals and policies in the comprehensive plan down to the performance metrics, tracking a lot of the operations and daily work plans of each of the departments that are going on today. And we want to be able to say that everything that we're doing is meeting the vision that's identified in the comprehensive plan. And right now the relationships aren't as clear as we'd like them to be. So we want to be able to explain to the community members and our city council exactly how we're achieving the city's vision. So I mentioned the different kind of scopes, with different plans being recently updated and some plans not so recently updated. And that comes to for the ICAP is that we are doing more of a partial update in that we're creating a new element, but we're using a lot of the pre-existing goals and policies that you all helped put together with the ICAP development. So in creation of this new environment element, we are adding something new. And with that comes the new vision statement. So in your materials, I included the vision statements from the land use element, which talks about some of what we're trying to achieve with the natural environment element, but also includes some concepts that we'll probably leave with the land use element. I also included the ICAP vision statements. It's originally 3, but I broke it up in the main concepts because they were a little too wordy for the presentation. But for the main thing of today's discussion, I want to try to pinpoint if there's things in the ICAP vision statements that we want to carry over or not carry over for this new element. And the other piece is the content of the natural environment. So I broke out the different topics that are covered in the land use element, and just initial recommendation is we move over the climate change and the natural environment sections of the land use element into the environment element. But we can discuss if any of these other topics might be warranted to be moved to the new element as well. And the last piece of this new element is looking at what was an adopted House Bill 1099 and what's pending legislation in the current legislative process, House Bill 1181, to see if that passes, how we can comply with. But we also got direction from the council committee to look at what's being required from these bills to potentially adopt them anyway, whether this bill passes or not.
And what are those bills covering?
They were requiring actually a new environment element, covering a lot of what is already been developed through the ICAP.
Okay, so both of those cover that topic?
Yes. There might be some slight differences that I'll figure out with Stacy, but for the most part, my understanding is they're virtually the same. So for the comprehensive plan, the red is, I made an edit because you received a presentation that covered information that went to council. For these first couple of months, we're diving into the comprehensive plan, taking a look at where we can do a review of policies that need to be coordinated across the different elements, looking at what the new requirements are from the state and the county and from the region, and coming up with proposals for discussion with you all. And so we'll be coming back later, probably summertime, to have another discussion around what potential amendments might be going into the natural environment element, or if we're just carrying forward what was proposed through the ICAP. So that concludes my presentation. Going back to the original questions, Chair, I leave it to you on how you want to tackle these.
So I think what I might suggest is that we first go through general questions and then maybe we cover these responses to these questions. I know I have a couple questions and I think Laura might as well. So now I think thank you, Stephen. Thank you for taking us through that. If you have any questions on Stephen's presentation, and then we will then move into answering these questions after we've gone through questions ourselves. And was that a question from Laura?
Yes.
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about, could you give us context on how the comprehensive plan was used in reaction to like the dramatic shifts that COVID brought over the past couple of years? Was that something that you drew on as a city? Like, did we use it very much? And if so, if you could give a couple examples.
The comprehensive plan, since it contains most of just goals and policies, it provides some guidance on operations, but for the major shifts of what the city was doing, it didn't really do much just because it was untouched territory and how to handle such a situation like that.
So it was more just having existing infrastructure and planning set up for projected future kind of stuff. Okay, thank you.
Stephen, could you take us through the land use content? If you could just like do a quick voiceover on like what those all mean. It's like, I think we can intuit it, but like my first reaction is sustainability seems like it's related to the environment, but I don't know what that actually covers. So I'd love to hear just like quickly through all of those, what they cover.
So I listed out the natural environment just so you could see I went through and just picked out all the different topics. So that's one's listed in terms of the tree canopy, the goals around that, the critical area, preservation of Kara and the creeks and streams, as well as stormwater management. Those all seemed relevant for the natural environment. Seemed pretty clear that that should probably get moved over. The climate change is all the climate change goals and policies that were adopted through the ICAP. And so that one is another one that seemed pretty evident to also move over. The sustainability one, I actually assumed the same thing before I read it. And then as I was reading through it, it actually pertains to more of built sustainability practice for the built environment versus the preservation of the natural environment. And so that's a discussion I want to have with you. Does that need to carry over, or do we need to maintain that in the land use chapter, which is relevant to or related to a lot of the other ones? So development patterns, really specific to zoning and land use, healthy communities, talking to how the city is going to be preserving a lot of more open space and building out more open space in close proximity to a lot of the built environment. Centers is specifically a concentration of higher density in specific areas of the city rather than just building all out. And then the resource lands, another one is preservation of wetland, or not wetlands, but resource lands within the city. And then more specific.
What does that mean?
The resource lands one?
Yeah.
So that one is specific to, if we, for Issaquah is a little unique that we have a mineral resource industrial uses in the city. And so that, those goals and policies are specific to that.
Oh.
And then the last one, regional coordination annexation policies, that's actually in compliance with King County and the state requirements for how we are maintaining the built environment within our urban growth area.
Okay. That's helpful. So it sounds like the only thing that you even kind of considered might also be included in sustainability, but after reading it, the first two seemed like the ones that were actually more.
Yeah, and we can discuss that if maybe it needs to be in there because it talks about supporting preservation of the natural environment, but they are more focused on the practices for building out the built environment.
Okay, great. That's helpful. We have any other questions? Actually, I had another one. So, just to make sure that I understand, so you have land use vision, you have ICAP vision. Obviously, some portions of the land use vision would likely end up still pertaining to the land use section. And then some of that maybe would be combined with ICAP and anything else that would, is that kind of how you're thinking about like
Yeah, so
consolidating it?
some of it was potentially and this could go either way with the protection of forested hillsides, that being, having policies around, making sure that you're protecting forested hillsides, but also putting the built environment so that you're not creating hazards. Like, it could kind of go either way, but for the enhancement of the tree canopy, that kind of goes with the preservation of the natural environment. The transition to natural areas outside the UGA, that kind of goes with the natural environment. So I kind of foresee taking some of these things, put it in the environment element, and then maintaining some of these in the land use.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like more of the land use statement will go over to environment, and the land use might be your bigger project.
It is, that's some of the things that we're considering is how to look at that, but we're also, through this coordination across all the elements, we might be actually pulling in some goals and policies from other elements into the land use, so that might help with filling the void.
Okay. And go ahead.
All right, thanks. Ann Newcomb here. First, I want to say thank you. I love your vision. This looks like you've got a really good direction. And I've got some specific questions. So for LU policy A6, it says prioritize acquisition of forested hillside land that enhances connections to public land and supports the community value of forested hillsides. Do you have a mapped out of which parcels you're thinking would be good to acquire?
We do have a map, but I don't have it with me.
Okay.
That'll be part of kind of our next set of discussions as we're looking deeper into each of the specific policies and goals of what should go into this element.
Cool. Yeah, you probably already know this, but it's been my experience with the Issaquah Trails Club that it's good to be on top of it and get the land before it gets sold to a developer. Because then it just gets way out of control, or a lot better.
Yeah, through the development of the updates to the development regulations, we were able to map a lot of that out just because some of the new policies in Title 18 impact some of that. So we do have that mapped out, I just don't have it for discussion tonight.
Cool. And if there's ever any way that the Issaquah Trails Club can help on any of that, we would love to be there to help.
Yeah, no, we would love to talk about that. Right?
Awesome. Okay, maybe we'll set something up.
Okay.
So with the Mountains of Sound Greenway, let's see, that was LU 13. You said support A13, LU A13, support the goals of the Mountains of Sound Greenway project. Is that one project or is that supposed to be projects?
I think it's supposed to be projects, because
Okay,
there's
so
the trail
just
and then
in
there's
general
the preservations, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then now that people are working, a lot more people are working from home. And then there's this goal to have more jobs in Issaquah. Is that taken into consideration that maybe we don't need as many jobs in Issaquah, like because people are working from home now?
So the city is trying to think about that, and I know economic development through the update for the economic vitality element, we'll be discussing that with the Economic Vitality Commission. I don't know what direction they might go with that, but that is kind of on every city's mind of the change in travel patterns from more people working from home, but also people shifting jobs during the pandemic as well. That's actually one of the bigger shifts in our region is people are traveling in different directions more than working from home, but both are having a huge impact on what the job demand is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the people working from home help us meet our goal of having less traffic.
Right, our CTR goals have been way exceeded during the pandemic, but it's commute trip reduction, so encouraging people to drive less. But it had other unintended consequences. So that's part of the discussion with economic development.
Cool, well, thank you for answering my questions.
Of course.
John, go ahead.
I'm looking through it right now, so. Land use goal Q around maintaining the resource lands. I'd suggest to take another look at this one. There's bits and pieces of it that you might want to dissect and pull over. But I'm not gonna go.
Yeah,
through
no, that's
each one
fine.
with
Yeah,
you.
we'll take a look at it.
To your discretion.
All right, any other questions before we go into responding to the 3 items that Stephen had for us? And maybe just before we do that, I would love, Stephen, if there's any extra context you want to add to any of these questions, like in particular, how we might be most helpful on the first question, is it like specific items within those current slides, or how are you thinking about like what sort, or is it just general feedback, or is there anything in particular that would be?
General feedback, just because this is a new element, we didn't want to make any assumptions of what should be going into it. And a lot of work has been already gone into what's going to be feeding into this element. So getting any general feedback from you all, if there's specific topics that you think need to be covered, just because this is more of a visionary document looking 20 years out, it does get into the specifics of the goals and policies. So that helps us kind of take a look at, as we're moving things around, is there something else that we need to add some more analysis to in consideration of anything changing in the work plan or anything that maybe the city's not doing that we need to take a look at.
Okay, and then I had a question on the third one. Are there potential gaps? Is there anything, I know I think in the memo it mentioned that your team will be doing kind of a gaps analysis, but is there anything in general that you think, like an example that would help us kind of frame that question up?
Just, it's more of, we have the ICAP, we have the land use element. Is there anything else that we should be considering in this kind of consolidation?
All right, so if we can, I think it'd be nice to go through these one at a time if we have it, and if we don't have that many, this might not be necessary, but maybe covering these questions in order. So if anyone has responses to the first question, maybe we could cover that now, and then once we're through that, we'll move on to the next one. So yeah, if you have any comments on the first question, please indicate that now.
Well, definitely the ICAP and land use, definitely what you already have.
Okay.
Probably elements of the utilities plans, the stormwater plan, the wastewater plan.
So I actually wanted to ask about that, with the stormwater management being part of the utility plans. It does influence some of the land use components, so does that belong in the natural environment, or does that belong with land use, which is, I think maybe the dividing line between the two is land use focusing more on the built environment, the natural environment, the environment element focusing on more natural preservation.
Yeah, I mean, there's
There'll be
tight
some that I
line
go
there,
wondering,
yeah.
but I just want to ask.
I think
that
that's a
question.
good way to kind of keep them separated.
I had a question. I was wondering, so you mentioned the 2 different House bills and you said that the environment section was going to be required. Did they provide any additional guidance as to what should be contained?
They do, but because it's still pending, it's still kind of a moving target. So I didn't want to bring that to you
Okay.
when it could change in the next couple of weeks. Well, once that's adopted, if it gets adopted, then we'll be using that as guidance of what first starting what's required, and then going to what else do we have that needs to get carried over.
And I just maybe build on that to say that we talked a bit about with the climate vulnerability assessment that Commerce has been developing already model elements to prepare for this legislation passing around the climate aspect of it. King County Cities Climate Collaborative also has been working on model policies, and then we'll be talking about those climate vulnerability policies as well that would hopefully cover a lot of the portion of this bill if it passes and get us ahead of the game. So there's already a lot of work underway that will help inform the new components for this round.
And did you have, is that a leftover sideways tag? or do you
Oh,
have a
yeah,
comment?
sorry.
Okay. I had a comment around, I think the environment is unique in that if we look across a lot of these other elements, land use, housing, mobility, capital facilities, parks, and utilities, I think that there's going to be, if we were truly doing an environmental element, there would be a lot of influence on those other elements that should be captured. So I think that's gonna be one of probably your challenge, Stephen, is I don't think you can just put like a couple topics off in a corner and that's the environmental element. I think this is Stacy's challenge as well, just generally with the city is like, this is something, if we had an equity element, it would be similar in that it needs to cut across all decisions. And so I think that's something that if we were to just pull things directly out of ICAP, if we were just to pull things out of Title 18, we might miss what I think the core of what I would hope an environment element does, which is how are all decisions in the city being influenced by the environment and protecting the two things that we have included, which is the natural environment and climate consideration. So that's something that it's not gonna be an easy thing, but I would encourage us to look at not just the topic areas and what parts of the code we could identify, but how this element might influence other elements.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and that'll definitely be part of our coordination review as we're reviewing this. So going through what's in the land use element or what's coming from the ICAP of identifying, maybe that one actually belongs in economic vitality, or maybe that one belongs in the parks element, and discussing that with the other departments as well. And we'll have that list for you of, okay, we move these to these other elements and we maintain this in this new environment element, and kind of discussing how best to, how that best coordinates what we're really trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think I was making a slightly different point, which is that I think a part of the environment element, it should be how other elements are informed by the environment element. So I think there's certainly gonna be the topic areas that will be distinct to that environmental element. I think what I was saying was, in addition to that, I think we should have how is the environmental element informing other elements of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, I had a comment if I can jump in.
Go ahead.
I think what you just said sort of triggered for me what I was struggling with about this is it feels kind of arbitrary. I think we worked really hard on the climate action plan and we're super thorough with feedback and vision for that. And then having a separate environment feels like such an abstract topic that it's almost, I don't know, it just feels really abstract. Because yeah, like what you're saying, just like with equity, it really is everything. Like without the land, what are we? We're like, we can't do anything. We can't plan for anything without the water that comes through, the air that comes through, the animals that live here. Like, so I almost feel like having an ecological plan or something feels more appropriate because it's more tangible. We have stormwater plans, we have, forestry plans existing within parks, but what do we have for ecosystems? We have some land use stuff, but saying environment, I don't know, it just feels like superfluous in some ways that it's just going to a comprehensive plan. So I'm struggling with it, but I think that, talking about like biodiversity and climate change and the need for resiliency and for social services to be part of resiliency is feels like more appropriate things to plan for.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments on this first topic? Okay, I think now we can probably we've already covered, I think, the second one a little bit, but maybe if there's any other comments on, and I'm assuming you're just kind of looking for in terms of like the specific topic areas that we've
Yes.
already talked about. Okay, so any comments on on that question.
You talking about gaps?
No, so I think it was like you, an example was you had already provided the feedback that like there's parts of the utilities that we may want to look at, or the resource lands that we might want to
Anything
look
else
at.
that-
I think that's the topic that he's looking for feedback on, and it was, yeah, going back to this slide, anything at this higher bucket levels from the current land use element.
I guess I don't know the city plans well enough to be able to make that comment. Do you have a watershed plan?
We have a water system plan that looks at the
Water
watershed.
system plan? Yeah, that's for drinking water. Yeah, I think you have to look at that too. I mean, you got aquifers in Issaquah as some of your main drinking water sources.
Mhm.
All right, well then I think, unless we have any other comments on this, we can move on to the final one, which is just around gaps that we see today, or that I think might exist.
My question would be, do you see any potential gaps?
At the moment, no. But I wasn't around, or I wasn't part of the bigger ICAP discussions, and so that's kind of where at least my gaps are of what went into the development of the ICAP, and if there's something that might be missing from that, or looking through the materials of land use kind of covered this, ICAP covered this. Is there, other than like the aquifers, is there another topic that we should be taking a look at and incorporating as part of this development?
What about the parks planning efforts? How does that play in?
So through the coordination review, we'll be working with the Parks Department as they update their strategic plan and the parks element, and just making sure that everything is coordinated across that.
I think it gets to what both Jamie and Laura were talking about earlier, is there's a lot of crossovers here.
There is.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's gonna be one of the more difficult parts of all this, of trying to determine what goes into this development versus what should be going into the other elements. And again, this is initial discussion, we haven't even dived into this, so it's okay if there's no other thoughts, because we're gonna be coming back to you with a lot more information and having kind of these deeper discussions around, you know, the gaps that we see by looking at everything, and if there's something else that we're not seeing by looking at those other system plans or the other elements.
Can you help us understand, like, say we give you great feedback and it's super helpful, like, what does that look like in 5 years? You're like, oh, this is because we put this great plan together. Again, we're not holding you to it, but just, I feel like I'm still missing that context.
Well, so for the comprehensive plan, I mean, it's looking 20 years out, so 5 years out, you're probably gonna see some relationships between new programs that the city takes on and what we're looking for the comprehensive plan, but it's hard to really say, this is what you'll really see by adding this to the comprehensive plan, because most of the time, you don't see the actual results until 10, mostly 20 years out into the future, because that's really what this is focusing on. What do we want the city to look like 20 years from now? Here's our goals for these specific topics that'll get us to what we're looking for environment or transportation and housing. Here's some policies that will say, this is how we want to go about doing that, but it's not specific in saying, here's our strategies to go about it. That's really what the ICAP is for. And so this is really taking a look at the higher level of, okay, 20 years out, this is how we want to get to that vision. Does that help a little better on the context of all this?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't spend much time on it, but I think my response to the first one could also be applied to this. I do think a potential gap, if we are just looking at the parts of the code that we think are within the environmental element, is that we miss how the environment should influence the rest of our decision making. So that I don't know if that sort of logic exists in the comprehensive plan today with other elements.
You know, when we developed the mobility master plan, we established certain values that we were using as kind of priorities for the strategy behind it. But it's really built into the mobility master plan, not so much the comprehensive plan, because it's trying to stay at that higher level within the comprehensive plan. So do you have something like that within the ICAP that helps with determination of priorities?
Well, I guess part of what I'm struggling with a little bit is like a lot of the things that are in the ICAP are in other elements. Like many of them, I'm just trying to come back to that. So yeah, like there's things around capital facilities. What is the city doing to decarbonize buildings? That's gonna be there. Parks, canopy cover. Land use, there's a bunch of different elements that are there. Housing is another huge one. Like that's right. This one has like climate in particular, like housing is one that I think about, like what we do around, not only decarbonizing the city's buildings, but like homes and residences and businesses. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out exactly how those will all, because like if we take ICAP at its, like use all elements of ICAP and use those as our guide, then I think there's going to be the environment touches a lot of these things, and I just don't know. I'm not sure and don't know the comprehensive plan well enough, or what we're going to do with this update. But that's kind of the question that I have, is with the addition of this, how the parts of the other elements are that are very much the environment, how are those are identified, and how we make sure that we're making the right decisions, not only for those elements, not with just housing in mind, but also with the environment in mind for those those parts of housing, for example. So yeah, I don't know that there's a gap necessarily. I just think that I'm wondering if environment is a bit unique in that it is gonna, I mean, I think there's some of that to an extent with a lot of these, but it feels like in particular, the environment is gonna cut across a lot of other elements. And so, yeah, I would just hope that as part of this coordination, we're really thinking with that lens and how, yeah, we have certain things in the element, but are also are encouraging crossover, like how are these things influencing each other would be an important consideration. So.
And a big part of this is also looking kind of the usability of the comprehensive plan right now, because a lot of if it's not built into the other elements, the remainder of the ICAP policies and goals were just buried a little bit into that land use element. And so it's a little bit hard to find those unless you really know it's there. And so bringing it out as its own element also helps with identifying that as being such an important issue for this community. And so beyond the usability, also being able to better coordinate it across the other elements also helps with that communication of what our 20-year vision looks like.
Great, that's helpful. Any other comments on this or anything else for Stephen?
I have one more thought. Just in terms of gaps, I almost think that going backwards and taking all the other major action statements and plans from other groups and then putting them through our lens and just having like call outs would probably be helpful, again, just for having a lens to be looking through for everything that's looking through for the future. I also feel like the gap is just cultural, that I've always had a major deep issue with the phrase land use. It's so consumer focused of what do I use this thing for and what does it do for me, that I would love to see in the future that we don't say land use at all, that we have some other phrase that's more helpful and longer term about the longevity of all the parts of our own ecosystem. So again, talking about the future generations and having multi-generations involved in the decisions we're making, including non-human species. So I'm leaning towards ecology again. So I would say I would talk to Dan Hintz and see if he has any interesting thoughts for what direction you could go with this. Yeah, and just food for thought that land use is a weird phrase. That's all.
No, I definitely appreciate that. I don't know that we could do anything about removing the title of the land use element because it's required by the state, but in terms of like how
The
we're.
future.
Yes, I think that's a really good point.
All right, Stephen, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think I got a lot of great feedback tonight.
Great, well, thank you for joining us, and I think with that, we'll conclude our agenda items and move on to reports.
I also just wanted to say, I did read in there that non-humans were taken into consideration, like wildlife and different things. So that was good to read.
All right, so there was one report in the packet, and then I have a number of additional updates I'll walk through. First one is on the Ruth and Dan Keys and the Community Environmental Awards. So as most of you are probably familiar, every 2 years, the city recognizes community members that have made a considerable contribution to protecting our natural environment. This year, we are recognizing 3 recipients for the awards. For the Ruth Keys Award, we're recognizing Robin Kelly, many of you know, is current director of FISH and is recognized for her legacy and leadership in salmon recovery, education, outreach. And we have 2 winners for the community awards this year. And income, very pleased to say, for her work. Her work on climate advocacy, Issaquah Alps Trail Club, forest stewardship. Many of you are familiar with the work that she's been doing around the community. The other person we're recognizing for the community award is John Smith, who has been leading the monthly litter cleanups and is also initiating some work on litter outreach and education with schools. So Monday, April 17th, we'll be having a reception with City Council at 6:30 at Council Chambers. If you're interested in attending, let me know. And I can work with Tisha if we have more than 5 that are planning to attend. There'll be cake and then a short recognition and distribution of the awards at the beginning of the council meeting, which will start at 7 o'clock. And then moving on to other updates. Just wanted to recognize Rishi. He was nominated by the city to the Association of Washington Cities for the Center for Quality Communities for outstanding youth that have volunteered their time in community leadership projects. Rishi was one of only 8 scholar recipients that were selected from across the state. So. About 2 weeks ago, we launched the Energy Smart Boost program, which is a component of the heat pump program. This is a city and grant funded aspect of the program that's going to provide 100% cost coverage for heat pump installations for low income households. These are households that make what's classified as 80% or less of the area median income. Around here, that's roughly $97,000, but is dependent on family size. We have opened up those applications, and next we'll be opening up applications for the moderate income rebates. This is folks that make between 80% AMI up to 150%. And these rebates will include a $1,500 city rebate plus a $500 rebate that will come from Gensco, depending on the model that is purchased by the homeowner. We also recently received an additional grant that is going to help us expand outreach further, provide more rebates for both low income, moderate income, affordable housing, and also initiate some work on workforce development. So that program is moving forward. We're starting to see a lot more uptake as the Inflation Reduction Act tax incentives have kicked in this new year.
Stacy, 2 questions on that.
Yeah.
One, is the low income element or the lower income element, is that in addition to the project that was originally, because I think there was like a specific joint project with a certain developer. Is this now an addition to that?
This
Or in
is
replacement of that?
the same program that we launched with the five cities that are partnering. And then we had City Council approved $125,000 for work at Imagine Housing. That is moving forward. It's not yet completed, but they're working on the weatherization. And it looks like actually we won't need to use very much of any of those funds. So we'll be using those funds to also supplement other affordable housing projects or low income installations. So is
And
that?
then the other question I had was, so it sounds like there was previously some sort of discount that the installer was gonna provide, but now
Yes.
there's an actual city incentive for moderate income.
Correct, yeah, so they were providing the 500, Gensco, who's the heat pump distributor, was providing the 500 discount. They're gonna continue that. They're looking at additional discounts, such as a senior discount. And then the cities will be offering additional rebate on top of that. So it'll be about 2,000. And then depending on income, folks will qualify for a different level of federal tax incentives as well. So we're trying to stack those incentives and rebates as much as possible to make the heat pumps more affordable.
And is that like 80 to 120, or what's the range for
For the
percentage?
it's 80 to 150%,
150.
yeah, following the federal
That's great.
incentives. Great, next item is just an update on board recruitment. Jamie, Dawn, and I completed interviews with interested candidates a couple weeks ago now and passed on those recommendations to the mayor's office. They'll be going to council for approval on Monday. We still do have a few spots that are vacant even after the interviews. We have a regular position as well as one alternate. So we're starting to do some personal outreach. If you have any individuals that you know that might be interested, please let me know and we'll continue to do that recruitment. The new board members that are appointed on Monday will start at our May meeting.
Please do that.
Yes, please do that. I
Please
reached
do
out to
that.
a lot of folks.
Are the youth positions covered?
Pardon?
Are the youth positions?
They are covered. If there's another youth candidate interested though, we can consider. So yeah, Ashwin will continue his position that we were able to fill the other one. Also in May, we'll be doing the elections for the chair and vice chair. Jamie and Don have both indicated a willingness to continue, but also openness to handing over if there are others that are interested. So if you are interested in chair or vice chair position, let me know and we'll do those nominations and elections in May. And then last for recruitment, board updates, just wanted to hand it over to Jamie to recognize the board members for which this is their last meeting, as well as those that have left earlier this year.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the people that aren't here. So we had a couple of members that left throughout this year, several of them, well, two of them being original kind of founding members of the environmental board with Cameron and Dan. We also have Matangi. So wanted to recognize, in particular, Cameron and Dan's contributions. Exciting to have a board member become a city employee, and look forward to see what Dan does with the city. We wanted to thank those two in particular. And then the two that are here, Laura and Rishi, both on to exciting things, and really appreciate both of you as well for now, 2.5, 3 years of contributions, and yeah, it'll be sad to see both of you go, but I know you'll always be able to come back to our meetings and join us as a public attendees. So we don't expect you to do that, but every once in a while. But yeah, I really want to thank both of you for your contributions, and we'll miss you on board. Yeah.
We'll definitely miss both of you.
Thanks, it's been fun. I'm gonna be on the sustainability committee at my firm in Seattle, so I'll be carrying the fight on elsewhere.
Cool. Nice.
Way to go.
Maybe we can recruit Rishi if he moves back after college.
Great. Just a couple last few updates. Just that the Earth Month webpage is live. There's a lot going on in April around the city. So several waste collection events I've mentioned, restoration projects happening, cleanup days, of course, the fair on Sunday. So definitely check out the Earth Month webpage if you're interested in registering or showing up for any of those events. And then I believe Tisha sent out an email that you all should have received today that we are going to be moving to Teams. We are getting away from WebEx because our systems are not set up for WebEx. Hence a lot of the technical difficulties. So we'll be attempting that in May. We might be one of the earlier groups transitioning, so they work out kinks and we'll have IT available to help support us. But I'll send out, you received some instructions from Tisha today. I'll send out some more information ahead of our next meeting. And then just to note, the environmental board schedule of topics continues to shift a bit as topics are ready or not ready. So just actively maintaining that. I'll make sure to continue including it in the agendas so that you all have the latest schedule. We've moved a couple of public works presentations that we'll see later this summer coming to us. Then lastly, just hope to see you all Sunday at the Sustainability Fair, 10 to 2, Pickering Farm.
Thank you, Stacy. I think unless there's any other items from the board, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
A second.